Gerri is an architectural designer driven by curiosity, research, and a passion for sustainability, with a background in political science, activism, and ecological design. She brings a community centered, data informed approach to projects ranging from green schoolyards, new housing, remodels, massive light installations, and landscaping. Her experience has taught her the value of community engagement and the importance of designing with people, not just for people. Outside the work, she enjoys playing tennis, ceramics, and weeding the garden. So let's give a big applause to our guest speaker, Gerri. Would you like to unmute yourself and say something?
Yes, hello. Thank you so much, Paula. Thank you to PRN for having me here. Excited to talk about parking day with you all.
Awesome. Yay. So let's give a big applause to Gerri. I'm going to stop sharing. And Gerri, please, the floor is yours.
Excellent. I'm excited to see so many people who are interested in participating in Parking Day. I'll just take 1 minute before sharing my slides, but my experience with Parking Day, I've done it 5 years now. I was born and raised in Wisconsin in the Midwest, and my first job out of grad school was with a firm in San Francisco. The principal there was a part of Walk SF, so pedestrian safety, as well as space making, was just very much in the DNA of this firm called Interstice Architects. We also happen to be based in the Tenderloin, which is historically a bit of a nefarious neighborhood. And so we did parking day many different ways, and I'll show you slides of that coming up. But I was always driven to it from both like an art aspect and the opportunity to make social impact with, oh, at the time, 1 day installation. Now it's kind of expanded to 2 days. But yeah, why don't we dive into it? I also wanted to echo what Paula said while I'm going through these slides. At the end, I am curious for those who are here and those who are brave enough to sort of share what your initial ideas for your own personal parking day installation might be. I think it'll be really inspiring for us to hear what kind of concepts people are already cooking up and maybe do a little bit of workshopping of what that could entail. So let me just share my screen here. Bump you guys up here. Okay. So, like Paula was saying, September 19th is when parking day is going to occur. It should last into the weekend. Um, just know, even though that date is months away, it does come up fast once you start to break down all the planning that your installation might entail. So it's never too early to start thinking about it. So many of you might be familiar, but let's just start at the beginning. What is Parking Day? It is a global event, although obviously a lot of the installations occur in the US, but we are seeing more and more international installations happening. It's where community members temporarily transform a parking spot, although don't feel too limited only to this parking spot, and I'll get into a little bit more of that later. So turning these spaces into gathering spaces or public parks. Through this action, communities advocate for safer, more sustainable, and more inclusive streets that prioritize people over cars. I know I'm preaching to the choir a bit right now, but just this concept that a parking space is truly car storage. And I think a lot of us want to challenge the idea that so much square footage of our cities and communities needs to be devoted to car storage. And perhaps a lot of that space could be reallocated to serve the people in those communities. And so here's just a few examples. I think that this slide really encompasses the spectrum of how sort of produced these parking day installations could be. You can see in the bottom right corner, there's just a simple cornhole setup with chalk on the ground and a cardboard barrier. So found materials, materials that people probably had sitting in their basements, just taking over a parking space. all the way up to, people producing games, using landscaping, even skills in sculpture and art creation. You can get as uninvolved or as super involved and detailed and complex as you are willing to. So we see the full gamut on parking day. I think that every type of installation is great. I think what, webinars like this are trying to encourage is like the more the better. The more people getting involved, the better. So don't think that there's a huge barrier to entry when it comes to parking day. This is a little bit of my experience with Parking Day, working with that firm I mentioned in San Francisco, Interstice Architects. We did a range of different types of installations where, one, we cut down bamboo to create structure where there were mylar fringe that everybody could walk through, who was passing by. And then at the base, we had a map of the city that showed where the most bicycle accidents were occurring. So it was a heavy topic, mirrored in trying to have people gravitate towards our installation and start those discussions about bike safety. We also had people put stickers on this map to show like where they might have had close calls as a pedestrian. So it was really our intention and our overall, I guess, thesis for that parking day installation was to create something that was pleasant to play in, but also create a space where we could talk about the serious issue of pedestrian safety in San Francisco. We also did things like create really interactive installations where we created a huge piece of furniture that people could swing and bounce and rock on. We then gravitated up towards taking over an entire alleyway where we actually pushed parking day into the evening and late night, where we had a number of light artists come in and take over space along an entire alleyway to showcase like people can activate these alleyways. Again, it was in the Tenderloin and trying to take that space back for more gathering space and public interaction rather than unsafe dark spaces. You can see that our work and our obsession with Parking Day led to, on the sides of this slide, more permanent installations. One of the last projects I worked on with them was what we called not a parklet, but a barklet, where people could bring their pets. It was like a pet relief area that was much needed in this part of town where there were just really few parks. So even though Parking Day parking spots are small, they can be really impactful, especially when there's not too much green space in a particular area. So how it started was in San Francisco with Rebar, a design team that's still kicking around. They started way back in 2005, and it was just a humble bed of sod, a bench, and a tree. They were taking note of that this kind of square footage is actually pretty affordable. You're just paying a parking meter. And their work here, this installation, especially in the city of San Francisco, really resonated and kickstarted a lot of the hundreds of parklets that we see around the city now, which have obviously helped spearhead more of the parklets that we see all around the US. And so Parking Day, they started this back 20 years ago. And the official event, I think, is around 17 years old now. So one small action, just tactical urbanism or guerrilla urbanism, you'll hear a lot of folks talk about just kind of pushing through and making change to the urban landscape without necessarily all the permissions that you need can really have a larger impact. So, yep, 17 years now, Parking Day has been going. Worldwide event. We'd love to see more and more international installations. But one of the big things that have reverberated around this event are the conversations around climate change, street safety, mobility equality, land use, or whatever else, whatever very specific local issue you might want to encapsulate with your Parking Day event. And so let's talk a little bit more about what that could mean. So, Parking Day has served as inspirations for parklets, obviously, and pandemic era outdoor eating. It has driven long-term change and broader rethinking about how we can reclaim our parking for people through direct repurposing of parking spaces for glitz, bike parking, outdoor dining, through safer street redesign, and through zoning and land use policy changes. And so, obviously, with parking day, there's a lot of focus on the parking space, what that parking space could be. I allow you to also open your mind and not be too bound by that because we have done parking day and used it as inspiration for where could we put crosswalks, where could we create plazas, where can we reclaim whole streets. So the parking day is like that, has that ripple effect of how much of the streetscape can we reclaim for different types of uses other than for car travel. So here's just a few other examples of what people have done used as installations. Interactivity, I think, is a really vital aspect of it. Of course, you can make something beautiful for pedestrians to pass by and see what you've done. But I have personally found that finding something for the passerbys to do when they visit your parking day installation is really useful. It might be as simple as putting a sticker on a map, having them fill out a card of where they would like to see a plaza in their city, or playing a game. Having the folks interact with you in a way that leaves a positive impact, I think just makes all the effort and investment that you put into your parking day event reverberate out that much more. So a little bit about strong towns. I'm just really excited to be partnering with PRN because I feel like our objectives align so strongly. So Strong Towns PDX, which is what I'm a part of here in Portland, Oregon, is the local conversation, we call it, similar to a local chapter. We were founded in 2022. And so we connect via connection, education, advocacy, and action, and we empower our neighbors to make tangible change in their community. One thing that I find that's really great about this group in particular is that every member, even if you just join that day, if you have an idea that resonates with the group, they're ready to be there and support you and take it on. And so there's a huge variety of topics that people want to integrate into Portland, how we can make our streets safer, how we can make our community stronger. And the leadership really emboldens us to bring those ideas to the table. We like to take on small wins. I know in times such as these, where there's a lot that might feel like has flooded the zone in terms of large issues that our world is dealing with. We like to really focus on the local small changes that we can make. And this group really helps in not only supporting us, but also training us how to make advocacy happen. So, for example, how do you do parking day? Is there an educational component to how we can do this? How do you give public testimony? There's education on how to do that. How do you fill out a permit? So Strong Towns is definitely a great they have local chapters all around the US, and it's definitely a great group to be a part of if you're interested in these issues. So we started our first parking day in Strong Towns PDX in 2023. It wasn't particularly flashy, but it was impactful. So our goal, when we stepped back and said, okay, what do we want the parking day impact to have? There was an issue along this street here, Northeast Gleason, that it's an incredibly busy street that's surrounded by neighborhoods, local shops and commerce, where people are going over the street constantly during the day. And there were very, very few crossing walks or pedestrian infrastructure that made this street feel safe. So, in our own version of tactical urbanism, late in the in the early hours of the day, around 3 and 4 a.m., by cover of night, we painted this crosswalk. And during our parking day installation, we had a booth set up. where we could have people sign petitions asking for more crosswalks to be painted along this Northeast Gleason Street. We had over 70 people walk across the intersection. We had partnered with the local neighborhood organization. We had a lot of social media buzz and were featured in local papers, and ultimately led to more permanent crosswalks in this area. So we had a really strong objective with this type of parking day installation, and it was all about pedestrian safety and just proving to the city that a lot of people would support it. It would be an easy infrastructural change, and that it was something that they should do. So we proved it before they actually did it themselves. The following year, we decided to go even bigger. There was a lot of talk in our group about an interest in public plazas. A lot of budget discussion has centered around plazas in the Portland area in the last year or so. And we wanted to use Parking Day as a reason to sort of showcase how important the public plaza was. So we decided to look at one of the city's densest neighborhoods. I'll say, as part of the person who spearheaded this whole objective, picking the location for Parking Day was by far the toughest because there were a lot of strong contenders. And so, what we wanted to do was shut down an entire street from block to block and try to activate that street in order to showcase how great it can be to convert street space into public plaza pedestrian space. And so what we did was we chose this area in the Pearl neighborhood in Portland, which is a pretty strong downtown area with a lot of commercial aspects to it. And there's a pedestrian bridge just off screen to my left. And so we decided to shut down this whole area. And we decided this many months in advance. So that gave us time to talk with the local businesses nearby. It allowed us to realize, okay, we need permits, we need street safety, we need signage, and we needed to figure out ways where we could easily activate the entire street. You know, it's a lot of linear footage here. How do we make sure it doesn't look so barren, given, our team of like 10 folks who were organizing Parking Day. So our solution was to use pickleball. It was definitely trending up at the time. And so we could take over a lot of area of the street by setting up some temporary pickleball courts. We had cornhole. And then we partnered with a lot of other local groups to set up tents and tables here that could also engage folks who are coming to this area and talk to them about what it means to be a pedestrian in Portland and how we could make it better. So we worked with the Pearl District Neighborhood Association. Depending on what city you in, if you have local groups that are already established and interested in the community, that are already, well connected, it's always good to, at the very least, let them know you're planning this installation because it can set up some really great relationships. We also worked with Bike Loud, Better Block. We had a dance instructor come and teach a dance class in the middle of the street from Body Box. So that was really exciting. And then one thing that we wanted to do with just how much energy, money, effort, and investment went into this parking day, we really wanted to make sure that the word got out. So early on, once we had like our graphics and our flyers and our plan in place, we started reaching out to local media outlets, local news stations, local papers, all the neighborhood organizations that were around Portland, the mayoral candidates that ended up visiting the event. And it did end up like we had a couple of TV cameras come. We could talk about how important we thought plazas were in Portland. And so that was really successful in terms of like doing a lot of planning up front and like what I like to say is don't be afraid to be annoying, continuously reaching out to these news outlets because it really helped us spread the word and the messaging around this event. Um, like I said, we also had to do quite a bit of preparation in terms of permitting. If you are doing, like I said, it's a spectrum in terms of barrier to entry for parking day. If you're just doing a simple parking space, which I would assume that's what the majority of folks are planning to do who are here in this group. There, you won't necessarily need a permit, but it's good to research it. You might simply need to pick your parking spot and make sure you're there early enough that you can feed the meter and make sure no car parks in that place. So in our case, since we were shutting down a whole city street, we had to get permitting. We had to, I'm going to skip ahead to some of the challenges here, but we had to get a lot of official cones and signage, which that was very new to me. I had my van loaded up with all this sort of construction work signage that helped us keep the area safe. But just know when you're planning the scale of your parking day installation that insurance and permitting and all that fun stuff might come along with it. So that might dictate how big of an event you decide to do. I do just want to reiterate again, even if you are doing a small event, reaching out to the media, though it can be daunting, is highly encouraged. I think, you're putting all this work into something, you don't want it to be a blip and go unnoticed. I think just putting together a simple press release and sending it off to the editor, giving that media outlet a call and just informing them, hey, we're doing this. I sent you a press release. Here's what it's about. Here's the date and time. That can go a long way to getting more eyes on your installation and kind of making your message that much stronger. So wins that we had, we worked with a lot of other volunteers and really made those relationships strong with some of our local partners here in the city. We were able to get the word out. Like I said, we were lucky enough that we had some television news stations come out and interview us. That was super exciting. Um, and then we just had a lot of people joining. Like we had kids coming to play. We had people playing pickleball. We had people dancing in the street. And it was just people who were passing by that were like, what's going on? And so that allowed us to really see what we were hoping to envision, how people activating a space and using parking storage for something other than cars was really special and exciting. So here's just a few videos of people running about, playing pickleball, playing cornhole. It just felt like almost utopian, how happy everybody was. So another one of our challenges that we dealt with, like I said, there were a number of businesses along this street, and we acted early on to kind of inform the businesses of what we were doing. We wanted it to be really collaborative because ultimately, with actual permanent public plazas, we want those spaces to be assets to the businesses themselves, so they're supported, encouraged, and maintained. With this one-day installation, we also wanted to make sure that the adjacent businesses were on board and that there wasn't any tension there. We did have a little bit of struggle with the local laundromat or the dry cleaner because they wanted cars to be able to park and drop off their clothes there. So we actually tailored our event to be on a day when they were slowest. So those early conversations were really useful so we could accommodate everybody, be flexible, and show that we were willing to work with those businesses and not just ignore their needs for the sake of our exciting installation. In terms of pricing, we had to rely on a lot of our volunteers. We didn't do fundraising, so just that's another consideration to think about early on. Who's paying for it? What kind of materials are you going to be using? Is it something that you have or something you need to build or buy? Because taking over as much space as we did, or even just one parking space, it can be expensive depending on what you're trying to do. And lastly, as I mentioned, the traffic control plan was an annoying thorn in my side. So just having to get all these different signs and set them up ahead of time. Hopefully you won't have to deal with anything like that. But if you do something big, just know like safety first. So next steps for our group, we've created neighborhood subgroups for more focused work in this neighborhood. We're going to be working on, we have a general idea of where our next installation is going to be. And so we're working with the local folks there in terms of what it should be. We continue to work towards people-oriented streets across the city. One thing about our group is we've made close partners with the local transportation department here, which is really useful because then we have their support. We can rely on them for resources. They can rely on us for information and feedback about what the city wants in terms of public spaces and plazas. And it just helps with our overall advocacy plans. So that's pretty exciting. So here's just another few inspiration images of what parking day can be. It might be kind of a static installation where people can sunbathe. It might be more game oriented, might be more artistic, and might be more group activity oriented if that's something that you're interested in that can really show the activation of space. Like, look at all those people there. That's such a great shot. So I wanted to pause here for questions. And like I said, was really curious in terms of, what was brewing so far in your minds of what you might be doing for parking day. And after we talk a little bit, I just wanted to at least have everybody lay eyes on the parking day planning your installation how-to manual. I think just walking through that quickly, just so some of those questions start, planting their seed in your head of what you need to plan. Because I think this is a really great resource to go to once you start thinking about how do I actually pull this off. So I don't know if people feel more comfortable throwing some of their comments in the chat or if they want to unmute. Paula, do you have any tips on how to facilitate that? But I just want to hear who in this group here has some initial ideas of what they'd like to do this year for Parking Day 2025.
Yes, as Jerry said, if you like to raise your hand, or because I know some of you are already planning your parking day installation. So if you want to be a brave soul and share your idea, please feel free to do so. It can be at a chat and I can read it out loud, or you can raise your hand or unmute yourself if you like to.
I'll go ahead.
Sure. Hi, Kenneth.
Hey everyone.
Please.
My real name is Kenneth, but I go by Kip, and I'm one of the leaders of Strong Towns Vancouver. And we did our first parking day last year, and it was great because we made the location near the end of a climate march or climate rally. So it was a great place to have a lot of people passing by our parking day. And we just kind of threw it all together last minute, but we were able to get some fake AstroTurf and some furniture, or not furniture, what do you call those? House plants. And we had a map that says what kind of things do you think would be better use of this space than just parking of private vehicles. So we had a bunch of sticky notes. So kids were out there with sidewalk chalk, and it was great because we didn't get any flack from the cops or the local business or this restaurant that was right in front of us. So I think one tip for anyone else, any other groups that are doing this brand new, is I would recommend having everyone take all their stuff home at the end of the installation time, because it was kind of a pain in the butt to, deliver all of this borrowed stuff back to people all over the city.
That's a great tip. And also just showcasing like we're being respectful of the space. We're not going to leave a bunch of junk behind. Like ultimately, we want this to have a positive impact for everyone, even those who aren't directly involved in parking day. I also think, like you said, I feel like there's so many like-minded folks in this webinar specifically, but you'll find that there are many folks out there that have never even questioned how many parking spaces are out there, have never questioned how much public park space that we have. So just getting those conversations and the juices flowing, asking people who are just walking by, like, what would you rather have here than a parking space, can be pretty enlightening to folks. So that's awesome. That's exciting to hear. Kind of thank you.
And one quick thing is it's helpful to have a QR code, with a link tree, so that if people like the installation and they like Strong Towns or they like Parking Day or the Park and Farm Network, then they can just quickly get a QR code and then just, click to sign up for the newsletter or join the website or whatever it is.
Great point.
Convenience is king.
Exactly. Thank you, Ken. All right. I think Haley had her hand up first.
Hi, everyone. My name's Haley. I'm joining from UBC Okanagan in Kelowna, BC, Canada. I've known about Parking Day for quite a while. I think it was back in 2015 or 2016. I worked for a business improvement area in a neighboring town, and we did a Parking Day event where we had businesses take over parking spaces and try and create parklets. I guess just one sort of lesson learned from that experience is like really doing some advanced engagement and education with any partners that you have do that, because some businesses didn't necessarily get the idea, and they just sort of set up a sidewalk shop, like a market stall, which sort of missed the point of what we were trying to engage the community with. But then we also had some really great installations from like different service organizations, like our library that had like a checkerboard on the parking space in front of the library, so people could play giant checkers with themselves. So yeah, just that was like my one big lesson learned from that. But now I'm in a new role. I work with the University of British Columbia at the Okanagan campus. My colleague Kayla's here as well. We're both in our campus planning department. And sort of the idea that's brewing for us is we have a street on our campus. It's called University Way, and part of it was closed to traffic a few years ago. So it's always intended to be transformed into an outdoor plaza. We have a fully costed out, fully like schematic design for it, but it's never been a funded project to be implemented. So what we're kind of thinking of doing is using this parking day as a way to animate this closed street that still looks like a street but just doesn't have traffic on it, and show the campus what it could look like in the future and how the space could be transformed. My specific role is in sustainable transportation, so also just trying to think about ways that we can showcase different ways that people can move through our campus more comfortably and safely.
Oh, that is so inspiring, Haley. Thank you for sharing that. I hope it really resonates with folks. I think we hear so much about these amazing plans that cities and campuses and organizations develop that sometimes they never really get off the ground or they're never realized. So finding a way for it to be visualized and manifested even for a day can help kind of push that along, like get the wheels turning again. So that's really exciting. I have one question for you because you said some of the businesses maybe didn't fully understand the point. If you had to go back and do it again, what might you do in those early conversations with some of the partners that you were working with to make sure you had better alignment?
Yeah, so I think it would be sharing more like visual examples of what might be expected and asking for their plans in advance, so that if they show you something or describe something that doesn't quite fit, like I'm going to put a table and sell shirts off of it, you could maybe then go and have one-on-one conversations and find out how you could make that a little bit more community engaged, like friendly, like more gathering space and less just like commercial sales.
Exactly. Okay, that's great. I think that's really useful for a lot of us to hear. Thank you so much, Haley. Let's see, Craig, I see your hand up.
Yeah, hey, thank you for the presentation. That was fantastic. I really appreciate it. So I help run a Strong Towns local conversation here in Ardmore, Pennsylvania, just outside of Philadelphia. And we've had for a few years now, we had the Ardmore Master Plan, which it's one of its first recommendations that came out of that was to convert a large parking lot right in the heart of downtown into public civic space. There was a huge kind of demand in the community for that. And there's been kind of predictably a lot of pushback among a very small but very vocal, group of mostly but not exclusively merchants downtown that purport to represent everyone, but absolutely do not. So one of the things that we're doing, and I'll put a link to the plan that was the township commission to convert this into a public space. It is just stunningly beautiful, and would be so fantastic for our town. But as part of that, to demonstrate the value of public space over the private storage of vehicles, a couple of us are brainstorming ideas to work with. There's an ice cream shop, like a locally owned ice cream spot, right, like downtown, right nearby, just around the corner from this space, that has
done in 5 minutes, babe.
parallel parking, or not parallel parking, like diagonal parking out front, and to work with them just to take maybe 2 or 3 spaces and convert it into just a small seating area, maybe with some benches or Adirondack chairs or something, just to demonstrate that concept. And I think that would be hugely impactful for the goals here. So that's our initial thoughts.
Oh, I love it. That's so great, Craig. Thank you for sharing. That's such a perfect example of hyper local issue that you can piggyback off to try to garner support and excitement around, and push things through. I think it's also a perfect example of an issue that, try to reach out to the media there. Like this is like a campaign in a sense, that you're trying to get support for. So as much exposure that you can get, the better. And it also reminds me, especially with you folks who are dealing with projects that are wanting to take a more just general space, try to think big. That's why you see a lot of people using inflatables, large surfaces, big Adirondack chairs. Try to take up as much as you really can, especially when you're trying to allude to something like converting a parking lot into public space. So I love the idea of bringing the ice cream truck around, and having that be an active participant that people can come and actually do something really fun there. That's awesome. All right, see there's 2 folks there, Wendy Nash. Do you want to let us know what you guys have been thinking about?
So I have never really done, thank you for your presentation, it was great. I've never really quite known what to do, but obviously, like everywhere, we have a huge homelessness issue in Australia. And so I thought, what about putting a mattress, a shower, and a kitchen bench or something like that in a car space to highlight the sort of high cost of free parking and homelessness? If you had done something like that or seen anything like that, partnered with a homelessness organization.
Yes, that's what I was going to say. I think partnership obviously this is, can be a really sensitive topic. So you want to approach it with a lot of understanding and sensitivity. You don't want to run into any risk of people feeling like they're exploited with this. But I will say in my neighborhood, for example, we have a neighborhood association that's highly invested and has created a local shower project. And so there's that sort of infrastructure that's already in place where there's a bunch of people really devoted to that specific topic. And this, I'm talking very personally in what's happening in my neighborhood, but I know that group, they're always looking for support. They're always looking for exposure, and they're always looking to educate the surrounding neighbors about our houseless neighbors. And so I think that you having the energy to do something like this would be really great, especially if you can partner with some folks who already have a group surrounding this that might have a lot of inside knowledge and expertise on the topic. I think that would be a vital component, and I think they would probably welcome your compassion and enthusiasm to kind of bring awareness to that topic.
Yeah, thanks so much.
All right.
Just quickly,
go ahead.
I'm going to. Sorry, Gerri, thanks so much. Just quickly to add, Wendy, I copy paste the link for Instagram to an Instagram post from Parklet in Australia on the chat. So I can send it directly to you and see if we can connect with them and pitch your idea. I think it's a beautiful idea. That's that. Go ahead, Gerri. Thanks.
All right. I see Zach has his hand up.
Hello, everyone. My name is Zach. I'm with the Clarksville MPO in Tennessee. And I appreciate the presentation and the call, because this would be Clarksville's first ever parking day event. And so we are just thinking very small, kind of like the original, like some turf, maybe a couple of chairs, a couple of trees from like a local nursery. But right now, so I'm kind of a rule follower. And because we are a government agency, I thought it best to reach out to the city and get permission and see what kind of permits we need. And so far, we've been met with a little bit of hesitation around liability and things like that. So we're kind of in a holding pattern. Worst case, the parking lot for our building is there's some spaces very close to the sidewalk and the street. So ultimately, if we had to, we would just move it over a few feet into our parking lot. But ultimately, we would like to do it on the street. And I like the idea of the ice cream truck. That it's very hot here, so that would be it's still hot in September, so that's a very good idea. Yeah, we're new to this here.
Well, we are very excited to see Parking Day sort of infiltrate corner because when you look at the map, you see kind of the larger cities. They always have a couple of dots around, and people are pretty familiar with the event. But to start to expose people in the other corners of the world in the US is really, really exciting. Interesting that, they're a little wary. Sounds like you're trying to tread lightly. If it was anybody else, it's kind of like, well, maybe just try it and see what happens. But I see, given your position, like you said, having it on the sidewalk and kind of dipping a toe off the curb might be the right strategy. And then seeing what happens, how the city feels in 2026. There's always the option, of course, of pointing to other cities and municipalities that have like specific parking day permits and just showing your local jurisdiction, here's what other cities do. Just kind of showing them the proof is in the pudding. People have been able to do this safely and effectively. But, kudos to you for pushing the needle forward and spearheading it in your area.
I did want to add one thing. We're, a small town, or well, we're not small anymore, but we're a smaller city in the South. And so anytime there's a new development or anything, the first question is, well, where's the parking? And so we counted every single surface and garage space in the downtown area. And we were going to do like a jar filled with candy or something and have a guess how many surface parking lots or surface parking spots there are in downtown, which there's well over like or now with our new garages, there's well over like 4,000 parking places. So that was going to be our fun activity.
Yeah, I think we have a lot of people in our local conversation in Portland who are really interested in data analysis, and they always bring numbers up like this, and it's always shocking where our resources are really put. So I think that's great to kind of bring that to the forefront. Well, thank you everybody for sharing. I want to do a quick time check with Paula. Do we have time to lay eyes on the manual, do you think?
Yes, yes, yes.
Okay, let me share one more time here. So again, this is on the official Parking Day, myparkingday.org website. Just go to the how-to manual. I'm not going to dive super into this just because you'll have it as a resource, but I did want to just kind of read out what some of the items to think about are, because I think that helps kind of bring up what's all involved in the production of Parking Day for your own local project. So develop a concept for your Parking Day installation. You can see that even in this group alone, there was a big range of installations that were driven by like a very specific local issue or idea that was pushing things forward. But as we've seen, it doesn't have to be as deep as that necessarily. It could be just a large checkerboard set in a parking space. Assemble a team of collaborators. So bring in your friends, your significant others, and then think about the local organizations like Wendy was talking about. Her idea is really amazing, and it could be that much more if they find those local collaborators to work with on that topic. This one was always the toughest for me. I don't know about you guys. It kind of depends, but identify a location for your installation. Get on Google Maps, start looking, go to Street View, and then make sure to look at who is adjacent there. Are you going to work with the business that's right in front of the parking spot? Do you want it in a place that doesn't have a lot of public parks or open space in general, and make that area, see what it could be like if there was more gathering space out in the open? So take a look. There's a lot of factors to keep in mind here, but planning early now, I think getting your concept and your location down within the next week, I think it would be great in helping in the whole planning process. Designing and building your parking space. I thought this was a really good thing to mention, eliminating waste and pollution. That kind of goes hand in hand with a lot of the ideals of parking day. Try not to use a ton of plastic to create your parking day installation. Try to find used materials. Like we were hearing with Ken, like don't leave a mess after, make sure everything's taken. And if you happen to be borrowing a lot of things from your partners for parking day, make sure that that all gets back to them in a timely manner. Oh, and the regenerate nature, I thought that was a good point as well, because bringing landscaping, things that grow, like we heard, maybe borrowing trees from the local nursery. In Portland, our city, it gives away trees every year. So maybe using some of those trees in your parking day installation and then planting them somewhere after could be, an extenuation of the whole event. Design elements, enclosure, that's a really important one to think about depending on where your parking spot is. How safe is it? How busy is that street? How are you going to keep maybe a toddler that visits from running out from your checkerboard into the lane of traffic? So just be really wary of safety and enclosure. Ground cover, they talk a bit about how rebar originally used living sod, but they don't recommend that. So just think about how can you make a strong visual impact with that whole surface area of the parking lot. Seating and shade are really important, especially because do you want people to just kind of walk past the parking installation, nod, say that's nice, and move on? Or do you want people to linger, sit, have a conversation? Having those accommodations like a shady, comfortable spot and a seat to sit in are important. Also, play and creativity. So is there a game there? Is there a post-it you want someone to fill out? Is there a video you want to take of somebody for social media? Think of what do people do when they come here and why do they want to do it? Are all just necessary aspects of parking days. So they list out here a couple different ideas of specific elements to put in your installation. And then just the whole process of picking a spot. Some of you might have spots where you don't have to pay a meter, but you want to make sure that they're reserved. Maybe there are folks in your group that have cars that can park there the day before or early in the morning and then move out by the time parking day is ready to be set up. Lay your ground cover, place your furniture or art or sculpture, whatever it might be, enjoy. And then, as we've been saying, make sure you clean up. We want this to be a positive impact, especially if you're going to get a lot of eyes on your installation.